All right, it's 4 o'clock. I would like to welcome everybody to the February 18th Port Commission meeting. We are delayed 2 days because one of our commissioners actually works for a living. Given today's meeting, we don't have to close the public or the executive session because we had none. So I'm going to move directly into calling of the roll. Commissioner Briscoe?
Here.
Commissioner Shepard? Here. Commissioner Bell is here, all counted for. And now is the time when we like to hear public comment. If there's anybody listening or online that would like to make a comment, now is the time to do that. Anybody? Don't see anybody looking down the list that might want to do that. All right, so we will close that portion of the meeting and move on to the consent agenda.
Motion to approve consent agenda items A through B.
Carrie, can you scroll down on the shared screen so we can see the consent agenda? Thanks.
I have no questions to either of you. Commissioner Shepard?
Yeah, I just had a quick question for Sunil. I remember back when we initially approved an incentive program, we had some discussion that it was potentially insufficient to meet all of our needs to attract the type of new air service we were looking for. And I also remember that there were some potential grants that we might be looking at to help fill some of those gaps. Can you just give me a quick update on our search for any of those resources and any likelihood that we may be able to track them to support this program?
Yes, good afternoon, Commissioners. Sunil Harman, Director of Aviation. Commissioner Shepard, both good questions. So our previous incentive program, which sunset last year, December 2020, did not have the level of marketing support that airlines expect, because we were dealing with financial constraints as a result of the ongoing downturn and withdrawal from the market by both Alaska and Allegiant on key routes. And we had not received any additional federal grants for air service development. This go around, it's a little bit different. We have an enhanced marketing package on a per seat basis in this new incentive plan, which is very competitive. And we also have a good opportunity to win a small community air service development grant with the FAA. That application is ready. We have letters of support from mayors of 5 cities. The FAA feels that since we've never been a recipient before of this $750,000 grant, there is a potentiality that we will probably be awarded the grant for Denver. So we're hopeful as we submit this grant, and it will be used to offset some of the costs associated if an airline chooses to fly to Denver. So it's specific to the Bellingham-Denver route.
Okay, well, that sounds like good preparation, and that would certainly be a routing that would be beneficial for us. So that sufficiently answers my question. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner.
And I didn't have any other questions, Ken.
Commissioner Briscoe?
I have none.
And I have none. So we'll vote on this. Carrie, if you please.
Motion to approve consent agenda items A and B.
Commissioner Shepard?
I'm a yes.
Commissioner Briscoe?
Yes.
Commissioner Bell is also a yes. All right, with that, we move beyond that into our presentations. Do you want to move to marine trades before we do broadband, Don?
Gina's on.
Oh, Gina, okay. Gina, I'll defer to Don. Don, would you like to introduce Gina?
Yeah, thank you. Don Goldberg, Director of Economic Development. I want to recognize Gina Stark, who's going to be making this next presentation. Gina was just recognized by the Chamber of Commerce for Whatcom County. She's one of 4 people that was just recently recognized for working so hard in resiliency during COVID-19. Many of you know that she led the program for us and helped support the cities as well as the county for CARES Act funding. And many weekends, Gina worked very hard. So she just was recognized for it. And I just wanted to make sure that everybody was aware of it. I also want to, her presentation that's coming up is on broadband. And 2 years ago, when Gina was asked to manage this program, she was like most of us. What she knew about broadband was who was she going to hook her internet up with and how much was it going to cost. Fast forward 2 years later, and Gina has become quite the expert in broadband. She's very well recognized now throughout the region. She was just recently asked to be on the City of Bellingham's task force for broadband. So I really, really want to emphasize what a great job she's done. And I'm sure you'll be very happy with some of the things that she's going to present.
Well, thank you, Don, for that wonderful introduction. And I don't know if he timed him being frozen or not, but thank you, Don, for those kind words. And Carrie, am I able to? It says I cannot share my screen. So am I able to share my presentation?
Gina, you should be able to now.
All right, there we are. We're going to do that. All right. Can everyone see the commissioners? Can you see the presentation?
Sure
All
can.
right. All right, fantastic.
And well done, Gina. Well done.
Thank you, Commissioner. Just wait, we're just getting started. So, and I don't know if I'm excited or nervous to go before Brian, because I know his presentations are always quite stellar. So I knew I had to step it up with my presentation. So, so again, the purpose of this presentation is to give you an update of where we are, but also a little bit of where we're going. So that's a bit about this presentation. And I know it goes without saying, commissioners, that you're definitely always welcome to ask me questions throughout the presentation. So this is just a bit about what is our broadband mission. Why are we doing this? You know, some of the things we do is, you know, we upgrade things and we replace things, but broadband is so much more, complex. And for us, we've talked about that our mission with broadband is to provide publicly owned open access broadband in order to serve our communities in our rural areas who are currently unserved and underserved. And as we go through this presentation, even this mission has evolved a bit. So what are our goals in doing this? Our goal number one is to build fiber routes in the highest need areas to bridge that digital divide. But it's also evolved. It's also to build infrastructure for our emergency services. It's to build infrastructure for emergency services. So building this infrastructure has a higher purpose and more purpose than just to get internet to grandma in Glacier. There's much more to it. It's to provide opportunities for competition among the service providers. It's our goal as we do this to continually be fiscally responsible with our public funding, to collaborate with our partners and our stakeholders. And then as a port, our primary goal is economic development, one of them. And so it's to support our business and to develop our economy so that we can bring new businesses to Whatcom County.
Gina, can I interrupt for just a sec?
You can always interrupt, Commissioner.
I think, and I know the answer to this, I just need you to get it on the record. We're often asked why we're doing this and why we're not leaving it to the private sector. And I'm just going to answer that from my perspective. And that's because the private sector is not doing this. It's not economically feasible for the private sector to do that. But if you would just respond to that, because that is the first question we get asked, is why is the port involved in this endeavor?
That is correct. We are building to areas where it's not economically feasible for our private entities to build to these areas. And I can talk about that more, but our private entities, you know, they have financial, if you will, formulas of, you know, when they look at a particular area, is it economically viable for them to build to these areas? And in a lot of our rural areas, there isn't that density for them to build to, so they don't build to them. And so these are those areas that have unmet needs. And as public entities, that's where we have stepped in and say, okay, we will build to them, right? And so that is why we as a port are looking at these areas. And that's why we as a port are investing to build to these areas. Yeah.
Thank you.
You are welcome. So part of a lot of the questions that you may be getting and that I have often gotten is, well, Gina, you did the feasibility in 2018, you know, you identified this route. We are now in 2021. You know, what have you been doing? And so this is an important slide because we were doing work in 2020. We had started a group called Connect Whatcom Work Group right before COVID, where we got a lot of our stakeholders together, schools and tribes and, you know, public entities, to get everyone to the table and say, okay, this is really important. What is everyone doing? Where do you want to go? These are fiber builds that we want to do. And so that was work that we started to do and was gaining momentum. And then COVID hit. And all of a sudden, all of our students were like, they're doing distant learning. So a small group of us, literally 5 of us, 2 retirees, Debbie All from the Community Foundation, the Mount Baker Foundation, got together and we started working with our school districts, and we worked with them to purchase laptops, Chromebooks. We started working with all of our AT&T, T-Mobile, Verizon's to get hotspots, some of our internet providers to start getting direct connections. And this was a heavy lift. It was a really, like I said, a small group, and it was a heavy lift. We started even before summer, way before school started, and to get these kids connected. And with also the help of County Cares Money and with the championship of County Council Member Red Brown, we were able to get the schools 1.3 million. And believe it or not, that sounds like a lot of money, but that still did not completely reimburse the schools for all the money that they needed to invest to get the kids what they need and get the teachers what they needed. And I just want to, again, just really on the record, hats off to these superintendents, and also hats off to the IT team. Many of these schools had one IT person. Nooksack School District, their IT person left. And so it was the community outreach person at Nooksack High School that took this on. And so it was a lot of work. So we did not rest on our laurels, even though we weren't hanging fiber. So back on track to what we are doing with our fiber project. So again, this isn't anything new to you guys, but it is an important part of the story, what our background is. So people are like, again, why is the port doing this? So we were given authority by the legislature to build fiber outside of our property jurisdiction. And again, and that's a really important distinction, because a lot of people were like, wait a minute, Glacier, does port have property in Glacier? No, we don't. So this is a really important distinction. We did our feasibility study in 2018, where we identified throughout Whatcom County the geographic areas of high need. And then based on that, again, with the leadership of the commission and Executive Director Rob Fix, we identified that segment 1 was to build out to Glacier, and that it was a high area of need. And then next step is that we acquired funding to begin the design and the construction for segment 1. So segment 1, so we're going to just kind of dig deep because some things have changed on segment 1. So segment 1, originally we were going to do a construction of 40.6 miles of open access dark fiber backbone from Bellingham out to Glacier. In that time, what I've, in my workings and in relationship, is that I asked myself, because with the original figures, we had estimated that the construction cost to build out to Glacier was just over $2 million. And that wasn't quite enough. Construction costs are a lot higher than what one would anticipate. So I began to think, how can we ensure that we make it out to Glacier? Because this was a promise that we made to our communities. It's a still extremely high need area. So what I determined and discovered is that there is open access dark fiber that goes from Bellingham out to Deming. So what if we leased fiber from Bellingham out to Deming, essentially cutting our construction build in half, and then build from Deming out to Glacier? And then reworking the numbers, by doing so, we would potentially have additional dollars to then provide last mile fiber to the home. So that's what the FTTH stands for, fiber to the home, in the communities of Maple Falls and Kendall. And that would make approximately 130 fiber to the home connections. And again, those fiber to the home connection would be open access dark fiber connections.
Who did we lease it from?
Who would we lease it from?
Yeah. Who are we leasing that section from?
The Bellingham to Deming, we would lease that probably from Wave. And Wave, again, has, it's a, and I don't need to get it into to the weeds, but it is in a 144 count. So it's a large piece of fiber. And they already lease to a lot of different entities. I mean, the port leases fiber from Wave. And then,
and it's up to the same standards of the new wire that we're, or the new cable that we're putting in?
yes, it's a very well maintained fiber.
Gina, what would happen if for some reason we put in the second leg of that, and down the road it determined there was a conflict and we weren't able to maintain an agreement with Wave for that first 20 miles? would we have a situation ever where that our investment would become stranded out in the last 20 miles because we were unable to get the right agreement for the first section?
Or you mean like all of a sudden would our customers no longer be able to,
Yeah, if our, say our lease agreement went south, we weren't able to get to terms, Wave decided to lease to somebody else, they closed shop, or a variety of different scenarios, what would happen to our investment on the other end?
so that's a really good question. And it depends on when that happened, and I'll answer that. One, it wouldn't be as strong of a connection. And it depends on, again, if we put in, like in Deming, if we put in like a hut, and it leads into one of the reasons why I would like to build the next segment, which would be segment 9, which would connect us to Skagit, because then it would give us an alternate route, right? If that ever goes down, we have another pathway to Skagit, then it would reroute it, right? So that's why. And the other thing that we can always do if that happens, right? We can always overbuild. Not an ideal scenario, but it's always an option, right?
I think that's the key right there, Gina, is that we're not going to abandon the concept of building that first leg if we don't come to terms with Wave. And once we come to terms with Wave, it's an IRU. It's called an irrevocable right to use. And then they can't take that back. They can't claw that back for that period of time that that agreement is in place.
And that would survive a change in ownership.
Or we don't, or we build it, one of the two.
And that would survive a change in ownership. So let's say Wave sold to Comcast.
Yes.
Yeah, that's written into the agreement.
Okay, that makes sense. And certainly connecting down to the Skagit system provides extra redundancy. You know, that again has always been part of our plan. But that sounds like a pretty secure agreement that we would be able to enter into.
Yes.
So Gina, I have a couple of questions.
Sure.
In that section, we'll be leasing from Wave. How is that going to be funded? Is that through the users, or is the port going to take care of that? What's the thought process on that? And secondly, if we have places in that piece that we are leasing, that stretch, if there's places we need to get to for service, can we tee in anywhere there, connect up and go off of there between Bellingham and Deming? Can we go spur off of that piece?
Yeah, you mean like if we wanted to, splice off of there and extend, I don't know, I'm just gonna say off wall and extend and do fiber. Is that what you mean?
We wanted to come off of that one we're leasing and service an area that's not being serviced. Is that an issue with these folks?
No, we could totally, splice off. And again, these are all things that are part of the agreement. But we could, and it just depends too on, how many strands we have. If for some reason, again, we're getting into the weeds, we have already utilized our strands and we need additional strands in order to do that. I'm sure that Wave would be more than happy to lease us additional strands in order to do that.
Okay.
As
far as repayment of lease, how is that? What's the thought process on that?
In terms of paying the lease for it?
Yes.
Yeah, that would be the port's responsibility to pay for the lease of that.
Okay.
But Commissioner, our funding source of that is the same funds we just showed you. It's curb money. It's going to be an EDI.
Okay.
Right. We just had a slide up there that had the source of those funds, Gina.
Yes.
So that'll continue on some kind of biannual or whatever the basis is, the lease is, or is it a one-time lease, or how's that work?
We haven't gotten into those details with Wave, but a lot of times with the IRU, it's a one-time upfront for, let's say, a 20-year IRU, and then it's just a one-time.
Most
Okay.
of the ones that have been structured in the state have been done by the Port of Whitman exactly like that, where they put a lump sum up front and they've got 20 years to use, but it's not like it's annual payments. And that's why we've identified and gotten permission, I believe, from CURB to use their money for that purpose.
That is correct.
Okay, yeah, I was just curious. The reason I asked that is I'm thinking, okay, we're going to lease something from somebody, but over the long term of the 50 or 100-year picture, what's it look like compared to owning it? That was kind of where my thought process was going. I hate the rent stuff if it's more or if it's better for the future to build it. I understand the cost offset. I get that. I just was curious how that weighs out against that.
We think it's about half, Commissioner. We think it's going to save us about half. It's going to cost us half to lease it versus us going in and putting in our own fiber. And that's one of the reasons we like this route, is it allows us to spend more time and resources towards fiber to the home instead of laying down fiber that's already there.
Okay, yeah, I just wanted to understand that what we were looking at there. Thank you.
Yeah, and then the other benefit too is, and we'll talk a little bit more, is, you know, as we talk about operation and maintenance, you know, we monitor them in terms of maintenance, but they do the maintenance, you know, and this is what they do, right? As we work with them, whether it's Wave, whether it's Ziply, you know, they are still accountable to us on you know, keeping up the maintenance of these fiber lines. And, you know, we don't have to worry about bucket trucks and, you know, hiring staff and all of that. So again, that's a cost savings to the port. All right. So timeline. So timeline for segment 1. So we are going to begin the engineering and designing for permitting. We're going to submit them to PSE and to WashDOT. Q3 and Q4, engineering and design for construction. And then 2022, begin and complete construction. And again, I say propose because hopefully if PSC or WashDOT, if we get the permitting done sooner, then obviously we will begin construction sooner. With COVID, we don't know exactly how backlogged they are. But in talking to my stakeholders and such, this seems to be about the timeline that is taking for permitting. So on to, and again, commissioners, you're always great, just jumping ahead. So again, like I already said, segment 2, Highway 9 is
Hey, Gina?
Yes.
Sorry to interrupt there.
no.
So back to could you go back to the other slide? So if we are starting construction in 2022, how long would construction take, do you think? Any idea?
Construction could take 6 months or less.
Okay.
It's only, you know, it's 20 routes. And this segment is mostly aerial.
Yeah.
Usually where it takes time is either the board or if we have to do pole replacement. Those are the ones that take, you know, that kind of takes a little time.
Okay. So then if that's 6 months into 2022, what is it, what's it going to look like for individual homeowners or business owners out there for, we get this fiber connected and lit all the way out to Glacier. We've got the backbone then of that infrastructure ready to go. How does the next piece happen where people can actually sign up and start using it and have the fiber run to their residence or business?
So there's two parts to that. So I mentioned the fiber to the home part, that's 130 homes. That piece will be going simultaneously. So we don't have to wait until the backbone gets to Glacier to have that piece going. So those people will get connected before we finish the Glacier route. And that's also another piece. We don't have to wait all the way until we get to Glacier to get that piece going. So we can potentially get people along that route connected before. Unfortunately, you know, there are folks at the end of Glacier that we are trying to get connected. And some of them are connected through other technologies. But some of them might not get connected until that glacier route is done. But some along the ways will get connected prior to this being done.
And who would be the ISP provider for these individuals?
We know for sure that we're going to have Ziply, and then potentially Wave and Pogo Zone will be out there as well.
Okay, so they're like what Skagit saw when Skagit put in their network. They saw a diversity of ISP providers come in to support. And are we starting to see that in interest as well from those private providers?
Yes. Because, you know, Ziply already has some old infrastructure out there. And so they are excited to be out there and utilize this updated infrastructure as well. So
Can you tell me the scenario under which we'd be required to replace poles? Are we not leasing those poles from other services, other cities, municipalities?
most of the poles out there are PSC owned. And so it's a rule by, you know, the FCC that if a pole that we're attaching to is deemed old and tilted over, and we are the last to attach to it, we are required as the last on to replace that pole. It's an FCC regulation.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, unfortunately, don't get me started on a rant on that, Commissioner.
How many of those are there?
It's about 3%. So you can guesstimate at least 10 to 15 polls. And sometimes what some will do, and this is when I'm going to reevaluate Highway 9, is that sometimes instead of just replacing the pole, what you do is you make the decision just to go underground instead of paying PSC to replace their pole. Is that you just go underground and just avoid it.
And would they come underground with us if we did that?
No.
They wouldn't share that cost.
No. We would just put in conduit.
Wonder what lobbyist wrote that provision.
I don't. PSC.
PSC. Hello.
Well, actually, it's a utility, so you know, electric company utility.
Sure. How convenient.
Yeah.
Gina, could I ask one more ISP question while it's in my mind?
Sure.
So what scenario would lead us to either the need or the opportunity for a public entity to step in as an ISP provider to get that connection needed to the home?
What scenario?
Yeah, I'm just, you know, we've had some discussion about different public entities getting permission to be ISP providers and to provide that retail ability. Where would that be needed in this kind of plan?
I mean, barring obviously the obvious of getting the legislative authority, right? And I would say, you know, if absolutely no ISP provider would be willing to do so, then I would say then we would step in and be that ISP provider. You know, in Whatcom County, you know, we are lucky that we have, you know, one, actually two really small ISP provider that I don't know that that would be necessary. But I think that, yeah, I think if we absolutely don't have one that is willing to do it, then again, with the fiber build, then maybe we would. Yeah.
Commissioner Shepherd,
Yeah.
I think that's why we are considering the last mile, because if the house is hooked up, the ISPs will serve them. It's the cost of getting to the house that interrupts service.
Okay. So it's not quite as much of a need for the ISP providers. It's that last mile connection, that part.
That's the really the economic cost burden right there for the ISP providers is the last mile. It's the highest construction cost for them. But many have said you build it to them, you know, like we're doing to the fiber to the home in Kendall and Maple Falls, you know, we'll serve it.
Yeah, got it. All right, thank you.
Mm-hmm. So on to, you know, segment 9. So we talked a little bit about this, so I don't really need to belabor it. But the two things that I do want to bring up of why segment 9 is the next one that is important to build to. Like I said, again, I already talked about Skagit, but there's again a lot of federal funding that is being proposed. We talked about broadband, how important it is. And Highway 9 is really one of those projects that the federal funding pot, if you will, that we probably have the greatest likelihood of qualifying for. Especially, and I'll talk a little bit later, a funding that's called NTIA. And also, as I just mentioned, segment 1, we can build off of segment 1. So from Deming, we can hook off of our fiber that we're building in Deming, do a splicing, what's called a splicing, basically connect our fiber to our fiber, and then build off of that down Highway 9. So really leveraging the work that we're already doing. So for that reason, and amongst these other two, which we've already touched on, is the reason why I would like Highway 9 to be our next one that we focus on as well. And then just for visual purposes, this is Highway 9. This particular scenario, as you can see, Deming is at the top, so that's where we would build off of our segment. This scenario is if we did Highway 9 all underground. So we would avoid PSC poles. More than likely, I'm doing a reevaluation. More than likely, we might do kind of a hybrid where some of it would be aerial and some of it would be underground. Underground is very expensive. The benefit of underground, though, is that the fiber is protected from the weather. It's protected from fire, and so that is the benefit. But again, the offset is it is a lot more expensive. A build like this, more than likely, the preliminary numbers that I'm looking at would make it close to 5 million, in between 3 and 5 million, more closer to 5 million.
I'm going to ask, is there anybody else that wants to play in that game and go underground with us?
In terms of like a private provider?
Private, public, do they, I mean, is there enough of an incidence of down power lines that somebody might want to join us?
Yes, actually, I have been in conversations with both Wave and with Ziply, and they might want to play on this route. So in having a conversation, definitely we did all underground. Even if we did a half and half, we would put conduit in, and we would put in 2 conduits for sure. So one for our fiber and then one for any additional future fibers.
And you said 5 million to go underground. What is it if we go pole to pole?
If we did pole to pole aerial, you're looking at probably more like between over 3.5. So, and see all these red squares? Those red squares are, and this is not even a true to scale, those are called our vaults. And each one of those vaults costs money. And then for each vault, you have splices. So you can kind of see there's just like, you know, layer upon layer upon layer of what things cost to build these things. It's more than just putting fiber in the ground.
Who makes that call as to whether we go up or down?
We do, I do. What you do is you kind of make the assessment. So you literally, it's called, you know, that's part of the engineering and the design. And you drive and you look at the poles. And part of the things you look at is, you know, how dilapidated are the poles? How many providers are on the pole? Because there's rules and regulations of how full the poles are. There's all these things that you have to look at and assess, and then do a cost modeling and see, you know, what is the best approach. And so it's just kind of, yeah, so that's what you do as you build these fiber routes.
And Gina, what has been, I've always heard it's good for our networks to connect, like for our network to connect to the Skagit network.
Mm-hmm.
Why, I don't really understand why that's so beneficial. Is it just that redundancy? If one segment goes out, we've got a backup, or is there any other benefit that I'm not understanding?
Yeah. One is, again, if a certain route goes out, let's say a fire or something, and that particular line goes down, then it's like a detour, right? Then the data still has another way to get to where it needs to go. And so that's part. Also, you know, strength as well, right? And so there's the redundancy, there's strength for when they connect. It's kind of think of it like a, you know, like a good highway network system. It's the same way with fiber or with broadband systems, right? The more connected they are, the better they are. Does that make sense?
Gina, I have a question along that same line as Michael's question there. So the route coming from Bellingham to Deming, is that mostly pole or underground?
That one is mostly aerial.
So it would make a lot of sense to go underground with the one up Highway 9 so that you have that option of part of it's underground, well protected, as you spoke to, whereas the aerial that's there is not that protected, correct?
The one out to Glacier.
Yeah, the one from Bellingham to Deming.
Mm-hmm.
That segment of fiber optic there, you said, is mostly aerial or all aerial?
It's mostly aerial.
So in my mind, with the weather conditions we have, we'd be better off to be underground in Highway 9 so that if the aerial is taken out due to weather, we have one underground, as to where if we had an aerial on both sections leading to Glacier, an increment storm or bad storm could take out both of them.
You know, part of the pieces that are going out to Glacier will be underground. And then the one from Bellingham out to Deming, again, that's not our fiber route. So again, we can't, you know, do it.
Right.
But, you know, again, when you're dealing within city limits, it gets a little bit more challenging to do an underground. because you're dealing with a lot of sewers, other electrical lines and such. So, you know, again, it's not our fiber route, so I really don't have say on how they build that particular.
No, that wasn't what I was getting at. What I was getting at is we're talking about laying fiber up Highway 9, correct?
Yeah, correct,
And we're trying to decide whether to do aerial or underground.
correct.
And the one coming that Wave owns from Bellingham out to Deming, you said they own that, and that's all aerial, correct?
Correct.
So if we put in an aerial and they had an aerial, we have a bad storm that takes out both aerial fiber optics, then everything's cut off. Whereas if you have one underground that you can route to, when the one that's aerial is taken out, you'll have that line would be a better backup if it was underground, wouldn't it?
I think there might be some truth to that, but the odds of two different areas of going out, aerial going out at the same time is pretty low. But commissioners, I think we're a ways off from having to decide whether our route down Highway 9 is in the air or underground. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, Gina, but that's definitely not
Correct.
a decision we need to make here tonight. And we'll keep
Correct.
you informed as we're going down this road as which path we're leaning towards and give you plenty of input on that.
No, but again, on that note, we get asked that a lot. There is a preference by the public to be underground with utilities and with infrastructure. So
sure, no, I understand that, but we also have to understand that's far cheaper to go in the air. We're going to get a lot more geography covered if we go on existing poles in the air. And the people that want it buried, they don't like the ugliness of having light poles and wires of overhead. But we're not constructing that infrastructure. We're just adding to it. So it's not like by us burying it, we're going to get rid of a bunch of overhead wires.
no, I understand. It's just that we're probing because at least me, I'm probing because I know that's what I get asked.
Okay,
In addition to why we're doing it is, are you gonna make those wires go away?
Yeah, and when we're asking for the funding, we have to be shooting for the high amount. So we've got to be thinking about that highest number for the buried lines, because if we have to go there, that's what we have to be telling our funders is possible.
Fair enough. All right. We're going to move on to, speaking of funding, let's move on to the perfect segue, Commissioner Shepherd, fundings versus. I know this is a lot of text, but a lot of it is kind of redundant. But I just wanted to kind of highlight what our main funding sources are. And this is not an exclusive, but these were our key pieces. So obviously the first one is the Economic Development Investment, better known as the EDI, which provides funding for publicly owned infrastructure. And this is really for us a very key, important funding source. And as you know, the funding amounts vary. And for us, this is really key because the rural broadband project isn't just to benefit the port, it's to benefit all of Whatcom County, right? As I've been talking about Highway 9 at Acme, Denby, Glacier. Further, you're going to hear me talk about areas by Ferndale, Linden. And so I think it's really important that we ask for the county to invest in this project with us. The port has invested a lot of time, has invested money, as you saw in that first couple earlier slides, that we've already invested over 114,000. We've invested staff time. My time is not the only one. Obviously, Rob and Don, but also Brian Keenan has invested a lot of time, our engineer, in this as well. And so we will be making a request to the EDI board for funding for this. The next one is the Community Economic Revitalization Board, better known as CURB. We've already received funding from CURB. We hope to go back and ask CURB for additional dollars. They have in the budget request for $100 million. We don't know if they're going to get that. They have a 2 million maximum with a 25% match. Again, their focus a lot is on economic development in our rural underserved areas. They've been a really great partner and continue to be a great partner with us. So I am hoping that they will continue to invest with us. And then Public Works Board, we haven't received funding from them before. This is a little bit more of a challenging pot of funding for us. They have a budget request this year for 45 million. Again, we don't know what it's going to shake out in the legislature. Their maximum amount is 2 million. For us, we would only qualify for loans. And as you can see that right now, their match is a 50% match. So the last time they had a open funding, we qualified for up to $1 million loan, but we had to put up $1 million match. And for us, and I spoke to Executive Director Fix, and I said that it just didn't make sense for us to ask for $1 million loan and then put up $1 million match. To me, that wasn't considered fiscally responsible. So we didn't apply for that. The next, this is a new funding source. It has 300 million. It's for the National Telecommunication and Information Administration. The notice for offer, for financial offer, better known as a NOFO, isn't out yet, but they're putting really big emphasis to do private partnership. So this is a potential funding source, kind of what I was talking about with segment 2, Highway 9. So potentially we could partner with Ziply or Wave to do this project. I don't know the details, so I will bring forth that. And then the other is that there are so many different pieces of legislation that's flying around. Sometimes it's hard to keep track, but now we've got the policy cutoff. Now we're just looking at things that have a fiscal impact that it's a little easier to track, but we don't know what's going to, again, kind of make it to the finish line. So there might be other funding opportunities, which leads me to our next slide, challenges and opportunities.
Before you go there,
Yeah.
how many of those 4 funding sources require the state legislatures to pass appropriate appropriations? Say that 10 times fast.
Right. Very well done. So for CURB and for Public Works, both of those, like I said, $100 million budget request and the $45 million budget request, those take the legislative action. We don't know what the final budget is going to be. So at the end of the day, CURB could get 50 million and Public Works could get 15 million. And we don't know then what the grant/loan programs are going to look like. So yeah, so both of those.
Do we need to let our legislators know that we have a dog in that hunt?
Oh, they know. I have made sure to let them know, but you guys are always welcome to contact them. It's one thing to hear it from me, but it always means so much more coming from you guys as well to let them know. For sure.
And what about our strategy for EDI? This seems like a proposal that everyone seems to support. I think especially with the pandemic experience, everyone sees the relevancy and the need here. We've all experienced watching our kids trying to connect to the internet for school and our people trying to work from home. Do we need any more strategy for making this a particularly attractive to that EDI fund that gets replenished with money every year and has opportunity to invest in these big projects? I mean, I see that EDI fund, these are the kind of projects that thing was designed for.
Commissioner Shepard, this is Don Goldberg. I have a bad connection, so I hope you guys can hear me, but I've been working with Tyler Schroeder for about 6 months now on re-looking at the EDI fund, the application process, what the fund's priorities should be. And so, yes, we're talking about this. Initially, we were going to go in for a very large ask for next month for an EDI board meeting, but we've decided that we'll probably ask for rolling amounts of money for the next 3 or 4 years. So as we spend it, we get it, and then we don't deplete it. But the council, Tyler Schroeder and Sat Paul are all very aware that we'll be coming in with some substantial asks for broadband.
So you just opened up Pandora's box a little bit. If you're going to restructure the priorities, is there a chance that you could give us or fill us in on what that looks like? What you're changing it from and changing it to, just so that we have a clue before we walk in? Not often I render Don speechless. By the way, Don speechless is a very, very unusual thing.
Well, Commissioner, I'm confused what you're asking. You're asking restructuring the EDI fund or restructuring the broadband?
Well, from what I heard is that you're working with Tyler to restructure the EDI fund priorities. And that's a pretty big deal if that's what you're doing.
So Tyler can't do that. That's a county council action. The council approves the EDI funds, not Tyler Schroeder.
Okay, so tell me what were you doing with Tyler then?
So that was Rob. This is Don.
Yeah.
So what we're trying to do is connect so that it's not just one-up projects that are politicized and deals are made in the back door. And so the idea is to prioritize things that have the most effect countywide.
And are you going to come up with a list, or is that something the county council will come up with?
The EDI is, there is a SEDS list that EDI comes off of. So the SEDS list is also being restructured to where we've asked all the cities to prioritize their SEDS list so that it's just not add more stuff to it every year. We're really trying to glue everybody together like we have the mayor's meetings and to have everybody work together to get the most bang for the buck. But as Executive Director Fix said, of that, it would all have to go through county council approval. But we want to stop this politics of just one-up projects and go for the things that have the most impact to our whole region.
And I think there's going to be a role for the commissioners to play here with conversations with the county commissioners or counselors. So we'll be talking to you about what conversations and who we want you to have those with. We're just not that far along yet.
Well, that sounds good. I've always thought we should be more in the driver's seat with our economic team. So they're based at the port and they really have the pulse on what those big investments need to be. And I think I've just always thought we should really be more in the driver's seat there. But we're off topic. Gina, we'll get back onto your
Thank you. And actually, Commissioner Shepherd, I actually do have a little bit to answer to your question in regards to strategy for the EDI ask. And one of the things that I think is really important, and I alluded to it earlier in my presentation, is that really helping the funders understand and not understand, but get a clear picture of what it takes to build these infrastructures. You know, a lot of times, as you see with these grant amounts, they are offering these grant amounts at, you know, 2 million or 1 million, and they're giving us enough money to buy, you know, a Hyundai, and it takes the price of a Tesla to build these. And so really coming into the EDI with really good, solid, actual built numbers of this is how much a splice case and a vault and fiber costs, so that there's a true understanding, I think is really an important strategy going in to the EDI board, and an understanding of once you build it, what it takes to maintain it. And also that the port is really working hard in partnership and in collaboration to get this work done. So that is my strategy going forward to go before the EDI board.
Great. I like that. And you and I and Don Rob met last 2 weeks ago or something. And, you know, one of the things we talked about that I think is a good idea is also that we're clear on some of those goals and that timeline. And you had some goals earlier. I also like some of those real tangible goals for people to see, like, by, you know, 2027, we're going to be able to connect every home that doesn't have fiber with fiber, something along those lines. And at that time, we'll be able to bring gigabyte connection to those individuals. Some of those real selling pieces that I think are tangible, people can see, oh, that's not that far away. That's in a reasonable scope of time. And that's the kind of speed that I need for my business and my home and what else. So I'll just keep sharing my interest in setting some of those manageable goals.
That would be great. Thank you. So we'll go quickly through, because I think we already highlighted some of these, but our challenges and opportunity. And I think two of these are really important. And I know that some of you have already heard of these, but these first two are really critical, especially when I was talking about all the legislation that's kind of flying around. And the buzz thing is about funding for rural communities. And this is not to say, and please don't get me wrong, that rural communities do not need the investment, because we have rural areas. But under the state statute, Whatcom County is not rural. And so that means that we get limited to almost no grants. We don't qualify, which means that we only can access loans, which then I'm going to revert back to why funding such as the EDI is so important, because as the port, as a lead, that would mean that the port would have to take on, you know, just if you just think about Route 9, $5 million in debt, and that we would have to pay back that loan. And that's a lot for the port to take on. And that's a heavy lift for the port. And this is coming from Gina, that I don't think that it's the port's responsibility to take on such a huge debt for all of Whatcom County. And that's a really big challenge. And I have shared that not only with our state legislators, but also our federal legislators. And I wish I had the perfect legislative fix for this. I don't, but it is a significant hurdle. The other one that's starting to come up is that a lot of the funders want shovel-ready projects. And I get it, you know, there are some that they get the money and then they don't quite have all their act together. And so they want to fund shovel-ready projects. And I totally get that. But again, for small ports such as us, that means that we need to upfront invest, you know, $200,000, $300,000, $500,000. And then if we don't get that grant or that loan, you know, that's significant, or even just us coming up with that $200,000, $300,000, $500,000 is again a heavy lift. So these aren't insurmountable, but I just want you to be aware of some of the challenges that we're dealing with. Now onto the good thing. Again, we have established great partnerships and collaborations. We've got the port, other ports like Skagit. We have the PUD is a great partner. We have our tribes, the Lummi, the Nooksack. And even through COVID, I've really strengthened our partnerships with our existing ISPs, Wave, Ziply, Pogo Zone. Even Comcast had some great conversations with them. You know, one of the things about them, at least I know where they're coming from, right? And where they are in terms of open access, no open access. Obviously, a greater awareness of broadband needs is really important. And then greater access to our elected officials and decision makers. You know, I have our local officials who call me and email me, and at the state and federal level, that I don't think would have happened before. And this really affords me the opportunity to tell about our challenges that we are having. And so this is another great opportunity. So this is about the future of what we are doing. And so our feasibility study was done 2 years ago. A lot has changed. I just kind of talked to you about our relationships. And so I've been looking at them and I'm like, Gina, do these still make sense? So much has changed. You know, before, you know, Ziply bought, you know, wasn't even in our community. They bought Frontier and now they're thinking about reinvestment. You know, Wave has built things. A lot has happened. COVID. So I've been doing what I've called a reevaluation. Looking at, do our routes that we had before, do they still make sense? Looking at identifying where the gaps are. And seeing that there are areas where we didn't even look at before, and saying, does it make sense for us to build there? Also, you know, like we talked about before, leasing fiber from Wave. So taking another look, where are there other areas we can utilize existing infrastructure? Are there projects where we can get results sooner? There are certain areas, you know, in between Ferndale and Linden, where there are 20 homes that we can do these smaller projects that are just as important, where we can do a mid-mile and a last mile and get funding and get these projects happening sooner. And we can do these while we're still building 9 and still doing Glacier. And then doing this, still keeping at the forefront that we need to be responsible with public dollars, continuing to leverage our partners and are there new and better ways to lever our partners, and then explore and continue to utilize our P3 model. And this is something that I know Executive Director Rob and I have talked about, and Dawn have talked about. And this is potentially doing co-construction with some of our private providers. It's a benefit where we still own the fiber, right? It's still open access, but we share the cost. And that's what a true P3 model is. You know, we've talked about, we want them to come to the table. We want them to come to the table. Well, due to COVID, they are coming to the table and they see the value of working with us and sharing in these costs. And I think that we can do this in a lot more other ways. Again, been talking to Pogo Zone, and I think there's ways that we can do a P3 model with a great local provider and doing something to that. And again, exploring more ways to do fiber to the home to the end users, because building, you know, backbone is great, but backbone alone doesn't get fiber to those homes. It doesn't get service to those homes. And we know those, you know, small communities where there's 20 homes, Wave is never going to build to them. You know, Ziply's never going to build to them. But if we build and they provide service, I think that's a win-win for our communities. And I think that's going to be that's what our overall goal is. But as always, I take my lead from you commissioners and from Executive Fix. And with that, this is it. Last slide. We've talked a lot about these. The one thing that I just wanted to highlight that with all of this is I've been working what's called a strategic plan, because once we build it, we have to take care of it. So building a strategic plan about the operation and the maintenance of our fiber, I think is really, really important. It's like a house, it's like roads and whatever. When you build it, you have to take care of it. And so I'm building the strategic plan about funding, taking care of it, and the operation. And then we will continue to identify future funding. So those are my next steps. And I thank you for your time and your questions. I'm done. Any last questions? I know that was a lot. That was a lot.
Thanks, Gina.
Mr. Shepherd, you got anything?
Yeah, I've got one. And, as Dawn said, you've done a great job getting up to speed in a very short amount of time on a really complex topic with so many strange and hard to follow moving pieces. And technology that's always changing too. So it's a complex one. I just wanted to ask about the collaboration with the PUD. The PUD has expressed to me from their commissioners some real genuine interest in wanting to collaborate with us. And I'd like to make sure that that collaboration happens in the most efficient way as possible, so we don't step on each other's toes, so we know who's doing what, who's using their best skills. And so I'd like to hear one, what do you think that collaboration can be? And is there an opportunity for us to formalize some of that in an interlocal, so we really do not get in each other's way and utilize our ability to support this project to move forward?
Yeah, I'll take that one, Commissioner. We absolutely want to work with the PUD. They've got some expertise that we don't, especially when it comes to hanging things on power poles, et cetera. We don't want to slow down as we bring someone else up to speed. We also have agreements with other ports to do this in kind of a port-centric way. That being said, we know Skagit has partnered with their PUD and it's worked out great. So I think there's more conversations have to be had. I think we're going to need to form a committee that's going to involve one of their commissioners, one of our commissioners, myself, Steve Joke, Gina, and her counterpart at the PUD. And I think that's the next step here, and we can get that done here in the next couple of weeks. But that committee then can advise both their respective bodies on the direction that the that partnership will take.
Okay, that sounds fine. And the PUD is bringing on a staff person who's going to be able to work on this, is what I understand. So that seems like a great plan.
Great. Any other questions before I?
Commissioner Briscoe?
No, I have none.
And I have none. Thank you, Gina. I've got a couple of things I'll want to clarify later, but it's not for this. It's just curiosity.
Absolutely, Commissioner. You know where to find me.
I do indeed. Thank you. All right. With that said, let's move on to the waterfront. And I think it's Brian that's going to take care of this.
Yeah, thanks, commissioners. I'll go ahead and share my screen here and get this going. All right. Can you hear me okay? And can you see the slide that has an aerial of the waterfront district? Okay,
yes.
Great. All right, well, thanks, commissioners. Brian Gowan, Director of Environmental and Planning Services. So I've got a brief update for you tonight on the Marine Trades Area Cleanup and Redevelopment Project. And this is one that we've talked to the commission about a number of times, but we're using a little bit of new terminology. Previous updates have all referred to this as the Whatcom Waterway Phase 2 cleanup. And although that's a big core component of this project, as we've spent the last few months, 6 months or so, kind of working on a lot of the land use discussions that I'll talk about here tonight, it became apparent, working with the Department of Ecology, other project partners, that this is a much broader project, actually. It's not just a cleanup project. It has land use decisions, habitat components, expansion of the marine trades, all those things that maybe aren't directly related to the cleanup. They all inform each other. So to be a little bit more comprehensive, we've started to refer to this bigger project as the Marine Trades Area Cleanup and Redevelopment. So what I was going to go through tonight was really just a little bit of background and context, a lot of the stuff we've discussed before, as I mentioned, talk a bit about how we view this broader project from some project goals beyond the cleanup, kind of how that drives the project team's perspective on things. a snapshot of the status of where we're at, kind of how we got to today. And then the majority of the discussion really is focused on the land use work that we've been doing for the past few months, engagement with the marine trades stakeholders. We had a workshop and other ways that we've engaged to get some background and information from potential users of this marine trades area. And that will inform staff's understanding that we can then convey to the commission, as well as our design as we move forward on different project components. And then I'll just highlight a little bit of the next steps and kind of where we see this project going for the next year and the next few years. So just for terminology, since we're kind of using a new terminology here, is when we talk about the marine trades area, really what we're talking about, it mirrors the marine trades area that's in the Waterfront District sub-area plan. And that's the area that's from the kind of the shoreline of the I&J waterway through the about 50 acres of the upland there that includes Bornstein's, Bitter End, All-American, the warehouse, Colony Wharf and the C Street Terminal, the north side of the Whatcom Waterway, and then the ASB. So that's what we're talking about when we talk about the marine trades area. Versus the Whatcom Waterway cleanup, the phase 2 work, which is shown in this slide and kind of highlighted in blue. They're all related and they overlap in some degree, but the Whatcom Waterway really is a MODCA cleanup site designed to address contaminated sediment in the waterway, the federal channel, out in front of the Bellingham Shipping Terminal, and then the ASB, but doesn't really deal with the upland areas per se. They all overlap and inform each other, but that's why we're starting to make this distinction between the marine trades area and the Whatcom Waterway phase 2. So just kind of backing up kind of on a high level for what we see these project goals as we're making decisions on this larger, more comprehensive project. One main driver, of course, is to complete the environmental cleanups at the Whatcom Waterway site, the Central Waterfront site, and the I&J Waterway. Those are all cleanups that are critical to redevelopment, cleanup and redevelopment that puts these contaminated sites back into productive use. But they also are, all those projects will be informed by our land use decisions. So one of the other key goals is to protect and enhance Whatcom County marine trades business and employers. And we can do that by utilizing our cleanup projects to be focused on land use decisions or support land use decisions that meet that goal. So those are the two main drivers that we have for this project. The other two that are a little bit more after the fact, but are really important and really key to why our projects in Bellingham Bay have been successful in not only completing projects, but getting funding from a variety of different sources, working with partners at Ecology and other places, is that we look for opportunities to do things like, pursue habitat restoration and enhancement within the project area. Waypoint Park's a great example of that, where we completed Whatcom Waterway phase 1, set the stage for the port, the city, and Department of Ecology to jointly fund the creation of the Waypoint Park Beach. That is a really great habitat project, a great public access project, and came in right behind our environmental cleanup work. But they were all done really hand in glove, so we were all kind of informed on the decisions as they were moving forward. And then the last one, kind of a high-level project goal, is to support public access and improvements in alignment with our city partnerships. Obviously, in the marine trades area, this is a little different than the downtown waterfront, but per our interlocal agreement and our waterfront district master plan, there is anticipated public access and parks in portions of the marine trades area where it's appropriate. And so we want to make sure that we're keeping that in mind as we're advancing land use decisions and design decisions. So those are the kind of 4 big picture goals. These aren't adopted formally or anything. This is just to give the commission an idea of what the project team thinks about as we're making decisions on this bigger project. So then just to kind of give a snapshot of or a review, I guess, a little bit on how we got to where we are today. Looking back, it's been a couple years. Obviously, we've been working on this for a while, and we're still in the early stages, unfortunately. It's a big project with a lot of moving parts, but we've made a lot of progress. If you recall, port staff really did an internal look at the land use decisions of the ASB with the previous assumption that the whole ASB would be cleaned up and transformed into a marina. And staff started talking about this internally. Would this be something that we could modify from a land use perspective? Would that have some trickle through effects that could make the cleanup more efficient, that sort of thing? We briefed the commission on that, and the commission gave us direction to more formally pursue like a feasibility study of that. And because that was really just staff level work at that time. So we worked with an engineering consultant. Last year we got a preliminary engineering evaluation of some alternatives, and it confirmed that yes, indeed, if we changed our land use assumption and the cleanup decision, that we could have significant project savings on the Whatcom Waterway and ASB cleanup, and it would also provide a lot more flexibility in our land use opportunities, which the commission had previously indicated was a desirable outcome of this project. So with that direction, to continue moving that forward, what we've spent the last 6 months or so on is really focusing on the land use discussions and engaging with marine trades related stakeholders to really get the staff better tuned up on what the potential users or the industries that represent potential users would like to see, or how they would use different properties. And that's what the majority of the discussion tonight's going to be about. So the one other thing we've been working on so that we didn't slow down the cleanup project was we continued to do the pre-remedial design investigation work, which was going to have to be done either way. It really didn't matter. It didn't change how we were going to do that work. So that was sediment sampling, geotechnical work, updated bathymetry, and we just recently got the report on that work, and we're going through the review of that right now. So that'll keep advancing the cleanup project while we look at these other land use decisions as well. So just as a reminder, we saw this slide previously when we briefed the commission on what the preferred revised approach for the ASB cleanup includes. And if you just looking at the broad brush of the colors, which I'll talk to, is that the recommendation was that we looked at, rather than a full basin ASB marina, that we could install some kind of barrier in the interior of the ASB, whether it's a wall or a berm. We could dredge out a portion of the ASB to a clean bottom and put that material behind that wall. And then the rest of the waterway work really wouldn't change. All those colored boxes are just dredging areas that we would dredge for removal of contamination. All of those dredged sediments could also be placed behind that wall, which would create a confined disposal facility in the ASB, which would be an upland facility. So this is just another figure that kind of shows those two scenarios. So the previous approach was a full dredging of the ASB with a confined disposal facility below the bottom of the ASB, whereas the figure on the right really shows that confined disposal facility and new upland on the right-hand side of that wall, and a clean basin with a depth of about 25 feet of water access in that. That also then results in about 12 to 14 acres of upland that we could utilize for expansion of marine trades. So those are all things that I think we've briefed the commission on and has continued to get support. This is, kind of an artist's rendition of what that could look like to provide a little bit of scale. So it's a large area. It has a lot of opportunity both for upland and in-water access. So with that in mind, like I'd mentioned, what we really wanted to do was engage the maritime and marine trades community to get some feedback on, if we had these 14 acres and these 12 acres of water access, how does that get used? What would be the ideal scenarios for all these different industry sectors? Since we don't have an anchor tenant that has come to us that we're building a project specifically, is there advantages or the things we should be thinking about before we make a formal decision? So we engaged with these groups in a bunch of different ways. We had one-on-one interviews with over 30 Whatcom County marine trades businesses. We had a survey. This was all kept internally because it was really to inform the staff, and it was focused. Then we took that feedback and we hosted a marine trades workshop with all of the participants who wanted to participate from the different sectors, so we could have kind of cross-sector discussions. That was hosted through Zoom, and it was a challenge, but it was also really interesting to have breakout sessions, and it was really well done and got really good feedback on that. We had some follow-up survey and additional feedback, and then we're continuing to engage with folks as they have interest and questions. And so just to dive into that a little bit, what we heard was actually a lot of support. I mean, there was a really great feedback. One of the things we heard from those initial interviews was across the board, folks recognize that we have a limited supply of waterfront industrial land. I mean, it's a finite amount of property, and it's always being challenged, and has other pressures, outside pressures. So we really heard loud and clear that the interest in maintaining or expanding our access to marine trades on the waterfront. There was a lot of support for marine trades, which was not surprising. This was the marine trades groups we were talking to, so they of course, there was a lot of support there. But it does become clear that the marine trades is a part of the fabric of our community, and the port is a big part of that, and we want to continue to support that. One of the things that was kind of interesting that we heard too was that there was a lot more preference for a kind of a multi-use type of facility that could accommodate a variety of different firms or businesses, similar to like an expanded version of FMIP, rather than like one large shipyard or two big anchor tenants. There was a lot of interest in saying they felt, the stakeholders here felt that there was a lot more use for Whatcom County type of businesses to be looking at a multi-use type of facility like FMIP or the Port Townsend boatyard shipyard scenario. And that then trickles through to these last few, just that there should be some flexibility on how we design this so that we can accommodate changing conditions. And then just, again, the acknowledgement that developing this type of property is really difficult. It's expensive. Permitting is really complicated. They had a great appreciation of the fact that Port was taking this kind of work on, and a strong support to reduce that competition with non-maritime related pressures on waterfront properties. So that was some of the initial feedback. And then we got the workshop together and had a really great discussion. About 20 people participated. Wide range of participants, had folks from the port staff, Bornstein's, the Working Waterfront Coalition, City of Bellingham staff participated, boatyards, All-American Marine. The Technical College Fisheries and Aquaculture groups was there, NTG Fabrication. So yeah, it was a really great cross-section of interests, and it led to some really good discussions. And we're going to put this together for in a summarized report too. So we'll present this to the commission, and then you can take a look at the more details if you'd like. But just for right now, for this presentation, quick summary on what we heard during the workshop was by sector. You know, aquaculture was a really interesting one. It wasn't one that was on my radar until we started this process and started talking to folks, but they identified that there could be a really unique opportunity for aquaculture or hatcheries in this area, especially with the location relative to Whatcom Creek and the adjacent Bellingham Technical College hatchery. There was also a lot of growth potential in the macroalgae part of aquaculture. Wasn't something that wasn't on my radar, but we had a really great discussion on that and how that has a really big potential growth industry. And then coupling with the technical college and the educational components that could be really work well together. The feedback that there were some potential challenges or concerns about water quality, that's really a key part, really important to aquaculture facilities. But, you know, that's just one of those questions that we need to be looking at if this was something that would want to be pursued there. So
was it just Paul Burrell in the room during that discussion?
Yeah, no, actually it was, Drayton Harbor Shellfish. We had the representatives from the technical college. And then there was somebody from, I think, also with Drayton Harbor who had a background in macroalgae. So it was actually a good cross section. I was kind of surprised.
That makes sense.
Yeah. And then on the boat repair and ship or manufacturing side of things, you know, one of the feedback we got was the concern about a potential saturation in the Bellingham or Whatcom County market, to make sure that before we made any decisions on like recruiting a large out of region shipbuilder, that we really look at trying to work with our existing tenants and try to expand their facilities. I think we've heard that from Don and the economic development group before too, that just from across all sectors, that growing existing businesses is sometimes better, if not better, and easier than trying to recruit outside. And then also that just a key that the job creation is difficult, and that the workforce for that sector is also very competitive. Then the last few here from the commercial fishing fleet. One idea at one point was that this potentially could be a basin to relocate the commercial fishing fleet from Squalicum Harbor over to this area. But what we heard was interesting was that they felt like the harbors are really well managed, and that the fleet is consolidating a bit, and that rather than expanding. And so they were happy where they're at, but they did identify that there are some needs that could be facilitated by using this space for other things, like a shipyard or a boatyard that has a bigger lift that could lift some of these larger vessels that maybe isn't available in Bellingham or Whatcom County right now. There was interest on having a drive down float that could be accessible for provisioning or for loading fishing vessels. And then also just kind of again highlighted the opportunity for multiple different uses in this area could really facilitate the supporting of the fishing fleet. And the last one was kind of a catch-all, which was kind of all in other industrial uses. And this generally just fits that idea that there's a lot of synergies that could come together from having different types of industrial manufacturing, machining that may or may not be marine trades related, but they often work well together. That there could be some things like, and that you see that in Port Townsend and other examples where you have machining and boat building and other stuff that can be used for across various sectors. So a lot of feedback on this, but it was all really positive, that this was an opportunity that was supported. So, and then this one was one just that came out of this, and I've just got a couple more slides here, is that, unbeknownst to us, it's kind of felt like it was maybe a little bit of a plant at one point, but a couple weeks ago or a month or so ago, after the workshop, in the Working Waterfront Coalition newsletter, had a really great write-up that was much more detailed than this. But what it told our team was we had done the work to get the message out that we are trying to get good feedback, and we're looking at marine trades very seriously. And this write-up just did a great job of capturing that. And the write-up that says, resulting harbors, docks, pier-facing upland storage, and associated infrastructure is envisioned to form a nucleus of a maritime supercluster extending from the I&J waterway to the Whatcom waterway, and would sustain businesses and attract new ones, and possibly some relocation of commercial moorage amenities out of Squalicum Harbor. So, it was just a great write-up that showed we're trying to get the conversation out to the community, and the stakeholders are hearing what we're asking and providing great feedback. So that was nice to see. So then this is the last slide I've got here, and what it really projects is the next steps. And what we've been focusing on here is land use planning mostly, and primarily because the Department of Ecology, we have a cleanup decision already in place. They need to have the port come to them and say, we've made a change from the marina. We are moving away from that and going to do something different. And here's how we would have proposed doing the cleanup now. And so to have a formal process that adopts that is the next step. So what we envision here is to get that we got all that feedback from the marine trade sectors. We're kind of briefing the commission now. I'd love to hear what you think about it. So far it's been, keep doing what we're doing, but if you've got any more feedback, that'd be great to hear tonight. But what we're planning on doing is initiating an update to the port-wide comprehensive scheme of harbor improvements, rolling this project into it along with a lot of other updates. And Greg McHenry from the planning division will be taking the lead on that, and we'll be coming back to the commission over the next few months with updates on the comp scheme process. And then with the adoption of the comp scheme, we're looking sometime in June or July. We're hoping that would be adopted. And that would be the formal commission action that would adopt this change in land use. Then we can go to the Department of Ecology under the next line under cleanup and initiate the consent decree and cleanup action plan amendment for the Whatcom Waterway project. And we've been working with them. They're very well aware of this. So it's not like we're starting from ground zero, and should be pretty seamless, but there is process involved with that. They have a public process as well. And we anticipate that between the comp scheme work and the consent decree amendment, that'll carry us through the rest of this year. One last piece is that we'll be continuing to work on public engagement through those processes. We anticipate for the comp scheme having a virtual open house where we can talk about the comp scheme as well as the Whatcom Waterway cleanup in the marine trades area. The consent decree has its own public process, and we're going to be looking for other opportunities to do outreach and engagement. In the next few years, we hope that by early next year in 2022, we'll be ready to submit permit applications for the Whatcom Phase 2 work. And we'll be continuing to work through that. That's typically on a fast track for a project of this scale. It's at least an 18-month permitting process, and that's moving fast. So we'll continue to be advancing the design through 2022 into 2023 with a goal of, if all things go well, that we could be starting construction sometime in 2024. There's a ton of work to figure all this out. This was a really quick summary of a very complicated project that is one of the port's biggest capital projects. We have a lot of funding questions we're going to need to work through. We'll be bringing that forward with the commission and working with Rob and Tamara on our grant capacity and all of those components. So a lot of work to be done, but just wanted to brief the commission on what we heard from the stakeholders, kind of show you where we think we're going over the next year, and address any questions you might have. So with that, I'd be happy to. And what I do, I also want to just acknowledge, this is not just the environmental division driving this project. This is a port-wide team effort. We have environmental planning, real estate, engineering is doing a huge lift on this. We've had marinas and the shipping terminal and marine terminals all involved in these decisions. And it's been a really great team work to get us to where we are today. And that's what will help carry us through these next few steps. So with that, I'd be happy to address any questions you might have.
Commissioner Briscoe, do you have anything off the top of your head?
No, I kind of need to digest all of what I've heard here this evening. And Brian, if you could send detailed stuff to the commission as you've got it put together, I'd certainly like to see it as we're moving along so that we don't get down the road a ways and there's a speed bump we hit. So I'd like to be kept up to speed on this as much as possible. I'm glad to see that the stakeholders came together, gave their input. That's very good. I wanted to see something get going there for quite some time. So happy to see things are moving along. I wish we could move along faster, but I guess at this time we can't. But as far as any major questions, I don't have any at this time. I just kind of reserve my comments for later on after I have more detail of what's going on.
Certainly.
Good job, Brian. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner. And yeah, we're happy to get together and address any detailed questions you have. There's a lot in here to digest for sure, and we're available anytime.
Commissioner Shepard?
Hey.
Yeah, nice job, Brian. You know, I'm always asking about public involvement in the decision-making process, and you've made a really great step in that direction with bringing lots of stakeholders and getting some really good input. So I like the way this is proceeding. I want to ask about input from one of the stakeholders I didn't see listed is Lummi Nation.
Yeah, great question. Thank you, Commissioner. We have been keeping them informed on this and invited them to participate at a whatever level they felt appropriate. I think we have ongoing discussions with them on on our framework agreement and our implementation agreements, and that's where we're using that opportunity to engage with them on this. And I think that seems to be working well for us and for them. But we do continue to keep them informed on a kind of staff level, and as well as their involvement in the Bellingham Bay Action Team, kind of from a technical standpoint as well. So we're doing what we can on that. I think that the implementation agreements and the framework agreement is the pathway where we'll do a lot of that engagement.
Okay. All right, just making sure. I know that's on your radar, and they fit into the puzzle in a couple different ways, but they're a major player, and I think there are some certain strategic advantages for the tribe to think about their own economic development potential and what they could bring and what they could benefit from participating in the opportunities at this site.
Yep, I agree.
All right, that's it for me.
Brian, I just want to support moving the process to take it away from marinas into some other use as quickly as you possibly can. I'm not sure. I'm pretty sure this commission's secure in the belief that it needs to move in that direction. So the sooner you can get that over to us, that'd be a great thing.
Okay. Yeah, we could look at, we felt that from a staff perspective, that the cleanest way to do that, for lack of a better term, was through the comp scheme. And since we're doing an update on that anyway right now, this was a great way to kind of package everything. We could look at a way to try to advance that maybe outside of that process and then roll it in and then see if there's some formal resolution or something like that that just says we want to go this route. I'd have to talk to Rob maybe and a few others to see if there's some opportunities to do that. So we could look at ways to maybe speed that up. The comp scheme process is going to take a little bit because it's bigger than this and it has some process involved with it. But we were hoping at the latest that July would be where we'd be coming to you with this. But we could see if there's ways we could speed that up.
Yeah, there's just some decisions that we know are common sense, and we've done the cost benefit. We know the economics, and we know the opportunities. So, yeah,
right.
When those no-brainers come up, I'd like to get them behind us.
Okay, understood. Yeah, we'll talk about that and report back.
Thanks. Other than that, amazing. Thanks.
Great. Okay. Well, thanks, commissioners. Really appreciate it. And like I said, we're available anytime if you got anything that they think of, and we'll look at how to maybe look at advancing this a little bit quicker.
Great. All right. With that, we'll go back to public comment, and if we have anybody that has some public comment, we'd like to hear it. Mr. Granger, you had a comment that went into our messaging. Would you like to just verbalize that? Do you have a picture of Bobby Briscoe on your?
Did you ask about Mr. Granger?
No,
yes.
Pete, he wants to know what
yeah. We were glad to participate in the stakeholders introspections there, and I think, like you say, for the most part, we're on full speed ahead if the port can do it.
You also asked for a photo.
Oh, there's a photo of the mock-up of what the half land, half harbor would look like in real life. That would be great. If we have access to that, it would be fun to show our members a possible look, what that would look like.
Are you talking about the photo that Brian had in his PowerPoint?
Yes.
Yeah.
We'll get that to you.
Thank you. Thanks, Rob.
Rob, I can email it to Deb.
Okay, any other public comment from anyone else? Hearing none, we'll move on to other business. Who wants to go first?
I'll go first. I don't have any.
Commissioner Shepherd, check that box. Commissioner Briscoe.
I have none.
I just have one comment, and that is a shout out to Mike Hogan and staff for setting up the legislative meetings in this challenging time. And I'm continually amazed at how good Mike Hogan is at his job. He's a tremendous representative for us, and he deserves all the accolades we can give him, because he puts a great face on the port for us in every arena that we ask him. And I also want to say thank you for the history lesson. I did get it, Mike. Thank you very much. So with that being said, I've got no other business. Anyone else?
Yeah, commissioners, just a quick public announcement. The commissioners are already aware of this, but Shirley McPherson, our 35-year employee at the port and our director of real estate, will be retiring sometime this spring. I think as soon as she gets her COVID shot, she's out of here. So we thank Shirley for her years of service and wish her the best of luck. But she's assured us she's gonna work through this transition with us, and we'll keep you attuned as to the hiring process. Along those lines, our Director of Human Resources, Elizabeth Monahan, has accepted a job at the City of Bellingham and is going to be the Director of Human Resources there. So we congratulate her on what will be an incredibly increase in responsibilities as she goes from 100 employees to 900 employees. So a good job for her, and I'm sure she's going to have some challenges ahead of her, and we wish her the best of luck with that. And that's all I have.
Both of them. Yeah, thank you very much.
Commissioner Bell, one thing, did we have a advisory meeting announcement? Did you do that and I missed it, or just helping out?
You didn't. That means I've got to get the agenda back up.
So we've got the Marina Advisory Committee is going to have a Zoom meeting at 6 o'clock on March 9th. And the Bellingham International Airport Advisory Committee, this is a combination of the TAC and the BIAC, will meet via Zoom on April 8th at 4 p.m.
Thank you, Mr. Fix. That's why you can't put me in charge of things. Appreciate
Hey, you're
it.
doing just fine.
Anything else? I say we can adjourn the meeting. Meeting adjourned. Everybody have a good evening.
Good evening.